Welcome back to the program. You are watching Daybreak live on Citizen TV. And right now I want to get into a discussion on the independence of the judiciary. Chief Justice David Maraga, about a week or so ago, came out quite strongly stating that there is an issue with funding when it comes to the judiciary. He said that he has made several requests to Treasury, and it's gotten to a point where they don't even pick up his phone. And of course, that has raised a lot of reactions from different bodies, including members of the public, but also the Law Society of Kenya. And joining me in studio to have a little bit of discussion about access to justice and the link with funding is the Vice President of the Law Society of Kenya, Harriette Chiggai. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Wahiga.
Thank you for finding time to join us this morning.
Thank you.
And you can join in this discussion as well. We don't just want to talk about funding, but also access to justice in totality. What are your thoughts? What are your views on this topic in this country in 2018? Let us know. 22422 is our SMS line, and use the hashtag Daybreak. Harriette, thank you once again. Do you share the concerns of the Chief Justice on this particular issue?
Oh yes, sure, Wahiga. And it's not just me alone, but I think this is a concern for the legal fraternity as a whole. Because you know very well that it's the work of the lawyers to actually defend the rule of law. Mm-hmm. And by virtue of that, the courts, that is our #1 office, mm-hmm, before we retreat to our own small offices. So this is our office. This is our office, and we need to be able to defend this particular office for it to be able to function. So it's a great concern within the legal fraternity, and it's something that we as lawyers actually need to take up and try as much as possible to ensure that whatever it is that we want to realize, mm-hmm, in terms of the independence of the judiciary actually takes. When you say need to take up, do you have any specifics? Is there anything LSK is working on as a sort of game plan to support or back up the judiciary? Well, a lot is going on, including negotiations. And one of the key things that we as lawyers must take into consideration and must do is come out strongly to defend the judiciary. And one of the things that we must realize as a whole, and not even lawyers alone, even the common mwananchi, is that if at all we have a judiciary that is not independent, the persons who suffer are actually the common mwananchi, the Wanjiku. And that is why it concerns us, because where institutions are actually interfered with, you find it becomes very difficult for them to discharge their mandate. And it's within those confines that we need to come out strongly and ensure that even as we defend the rule of law, mm-hmm, our courts, our judicial system is independent. Okay. You've talked about coming out strongly, and I want to talk a little bit about that. Yeah. There are those who feel that the new LSK administration is not coming out strongly. For example, under the previous regime, we would have seen lawyers doing sort of the yellow ribbon campaign, really a lot of protests. But this time around, apart from maybe a press release or two, and I pose this question to the president as well, beyond that, beyond this studio interview, are we going to see you writing a letter to the president? Are we going to see the LSK call for a 1 day of solidarity with the judiciary? What concrete plans are in place, if any? Wahiga, maybe the media is not covering us enough. Good, you're here today. Now and I'm here today. And I'm here today. But already we have written. We have written. To who? And we are following up with the same. And we wrote a letter. Maybe you have not circulated it. Okay. And maybe I can share it with you, okay, once I leave here. But you'll realize that different offices and different institutions have different ways of discharging their mandate. Okay. And I can tell you for sure our president's style of leadership could be different from the others. And a lot, we are waiting for responses here and there. And we will take the next steps as and when we see what is currently happening. So you don't tell me who you've written the letters to? We've also started, you've seen, we've started a media campaign. Okay. We stand with the judiciary. And a number of lawyers are actually writing. And that is still to create the conversations around this issue of the judiciary and what we want out of the government. And it's our plea, actually, that the government actually reconsiders, because this is one institution that we must all be able to defend. This is one institution. Judges and magistrates will not come out here with placards and ribbons, but we need to stand for them. We need to ensure that their work environment is actually good for them. And one of the things I'll tell you, Wahiga, we lawyers are already feeling the heat. And it will affect our practice. And this is one challenge I want to challenge the media, that it's high time that even, and this is part of another campaign, you, the media, go to these courts, and I'll send you to a few. Go to Eldoret Court, go to Kibera, it's just here.
Just down the road.
It's just down the road, a walking distance down the road. Go to Milimani, you know, just check, because you see,
check like what's happening
the
with the
infrastructure, because the lack of infrastructure and the kind of mess we are in terms of legal practice and discharging our mandate. And then go further, Mombasa, the low courts, and you'll see how deplorable those institutions are.
So the judiciary have valid concerns.
They have valid concerns.
Fair enough.
Which we need to address.
You've half answered my question. Do you want to finish answering it, or you want me to move on?
I think we should move on.
You think we should move on? Okay. What do you think have been the gaps of when it comes to funding? What would you say that if you've asked for a supplementary budget to fund the judiciary, if that happens, what are the key priorities you think the judiciary should focus on to quickly hasten access to justice?
One thing that must be done is actually the current buildings which have not been finished in terms of the projects, the court projects have to be concluded. It's important because it goes a long way to decongest the existing courts. And that already is a plus. You'll also realize we need to have proper IT infrastructure. You know, that is very key in terms of how fast administrative processes are actually undertaken within the judicial cycle. And this again is very important. And you'll agree with me, IT infrastructure is not cheap. And I want to believe when we talk about buildings, we are not just talking about the building block, but we are talking of the building and the fittings. I want to understand it that way. And we talk of buildings and fittings, it means the IT infrastructure, furniture and all that. Like in Mombasa, you cannot attend court without small things like the AC can actually cause a lot of discomfort.
In a crowded courtroom.
In a crowded courtroom, yet it looks so simple. But you know, those are the kind of things we are talking about. Look at the new programs the judiciary is putting in place in terms of decongesting courts. We have the mediation outfit, which actually needs funding. You know, we have the portable courts. They need funding. You know, in fact, in terms of the traffic offenses, I'm wondering how they are going to manage, because you remember we had courts cutting across the region where you were quickly arraigned in a small makeshift court. You had your fine, then you continue with your journey. So then it means now we are taking back everything to the small courtrooms where we really need to decongest.
Will more funding immediately make justice more accessible, or could there be other issues around the judiciary that also affect access to justice?
I want to be honest with you. There are so many issues within our judicial system that affect access to justice. One of them is political interference, and that is why we are calling for an independent judiciary. And when I say political interference, you'll want to believe that we cannot rule out corruption. You know, we cannot rule out corruption within our judicial system, and this is something that everybody is talking about.
Although the Chief Justice has asked that people should bring proof if they have any allegations against any judges or magistrates.
He needs that proof for him to take action.
So he's not seeing what other people outside are seeing from his perspective, or?
I wouldn't say that.
Or his hands are
I would
tied.
say even if he's seeing, or even if he's had, he needs tangible evidence to take action. You know, you cannot just take action simply because people are saying, you know. It will also be not proper in terms of even administrative wise. And the fact that the courts themselves uphold the rule of law, you cannot just act on basis of rumors. But I'm sure there's a lot he's also doing. And one of them is to call for evidence. He's calling for any evidence that can lead to him taking action to a particular judicial officer. And for that reason, I think we want to support this Chief Justice, because at the end of the day, If we have a judicial system that is mad in corruption, it then means the common mananchi will lose respect, will lose faith in that system, and you can imagine what can happen. It then means everybody to take the law in their hands. And that is why it is very important that judicial independence is taken back.
Speaking of losing faith, when you hear, for example, of an issue where magistrates are hosted to a cocktail by senior officials at a state parastatal like Kenya Power, does that cause any concern for you?
Of course it does. One of the key things that we'll ask ourselves, what advised that cocktail, if at all it took place, and what was the gist, you know? Because again, you know, the judicial officers, there's the decorum that they carry themselves with. And for you to become one, there's a way you have to handle yourself in terms of even the way the public views you. And it could have been an innocent invitation to a cocktail. But again, what transpired, you know, what took place, you know, and then after that, now we see the kind of issues that are coming out from that particular office. Now, it's the issues that are coming out from that particular office that are now being inquiries of what this cocktail was all about, why it was hosted, by who, you know, and what was the agenda at the end of the day.
In your meetings, do lawyers, I guess, raise concerns about certain judges? Do lawyers have preferences that I'd rather my matter be heard before this judge? Or that, has that ever come up?
Well, we are all human beings. We are all human beings, and even though matters appear before court, I can assure you each and every judge and the way they deal with these particular cases, it's based on what is presented before this court. And I can assure you, maybe I could be appearing before Judge X, and I feel that this judge, the way he conducts his court is above board. There are so many of those, and there are also some who most people would wish to shy away from.
For one reason or the other.
For one reason or the other. Those are personal preferences. It's humane. It also depends with how you interact with each other and your interaction in court. And again, personally, I believe in upholding professionalism at all levels. And that is why this issue of the magistrates and the cocktail became a big, big problem, because everybody, it's about perception. What do we perceive your office? Every day you wake up and you want to issue a statement, even as Wahiga Maura at the studio. What is your personal brand? It's the same thing with the court system and the judicial system. Even for us lawyers, what is your personal brand in terms of how you conduct yourself in court, how you argue issues in court, how you even treat your fellow advocate is very, very, very paramount in terms of how the general public and even your colleagues
then let me ask you this. And again,
yeah.
I did pose the same question to your president. He was of a different opinion. He was of an opinion that, first of all, some of these officials who were taken to court were taken to court before judges, not magistrates, and that, in a sense, sort of government-to-government networking for maybe fast-tracking of cases, you know, might have some basis somewhere, as long as, I guess, it was declared or something of the sort. So what happens when a body like the LSK or different lawyers have different opinions about the same issue? So what is the ordinary Kenyan supposed to believe?
Well, you know, it's okay to have different opinions, because human beings cannot think the same way. And an opinion is an opinion, just like you've put it across. You have to defend your opinion, you know. And anybody else can disagree with you as well, without even contradicting my president. But again, you'll be able to realize the basis of all these institutions' engagement is to drive towards one cause, and that cause is to ensure that the systems work. And that is all we are calling for, that these systems must work. When we call of, and that is why I'm insisting on an independent judiciary, because the three arms of government under the current constitution are actually given that independence. And we want to see it at play. You know, we don't want to see it on paper. And that is where... in reality. Yes, we want to see it on reality.
1 week after CJ Maraga spoke, have you seen any reactions that tell you that people have heard his message? What sort of response do you think there's been from the other arms of government, parliament, and the executive as well, if any?
Well, I haven't seen any reaction to warrant my satisfaction that we are actually moving somewhere.
Does that concern you?
It really concerns me. It really concerns me, and it's actually my plea to the government and even the budgetary committee. You know, in as much as we want, and you'll agree with me, the only reason I will stifle your finances is to make you subdued. You cannot operate.
We will. So you think that we will revisit is happening? Of
course. Of course, this is a revisit ploy, and we need to revisit the revisit ploy. You get me?
Yeah.
So that we get moving, you know. And I would wish we think differently, Wahiga. And this is actually a call to all our leadership. When you have institutions, when we work so hard to destroy institutions, we are actually destroying ourselves. And we are destroying this great country because a time will come when the chaos we have worked so hard to create will become a bubble. And once it bubbles out, what next? We'll have systems that are not working. And this is why we are very concerned as advocates. And it's time that our leadership rethinks how we deal with situations, the tit-for-tat games in terms of politicizing, every little issue that comes out in terms of administration within this country has to stop.
Let me then get this for you as a final point. So then what sort of steps do we expect to see from the Law Society of Kenya? What challenge would you pose to fellow advocates? You've challenged the government, but what role can the legal fraternity, which is very influential in this country, play in sort of backing what the CJ is calling for?
The legal fraternity should come out very clearly and strongly in terms of defending the judiciary, and especially the independence of the judiciary, because our work is to uphold the rule of law. The judiciary as a whole comes into play to actually define those roles, the laws, to interpret the laws and pass judgment. And the question that most people feel that if a judgment is entered against you, it's against you as an individual, has to stop. It's not. The judiciary is there to shape the rule of law and to pass rulings and judgments that inform the justice system. And if at all we are going to personalize each and every ruling that comes out of these courts, then we are heading in the wrong way.
Okay.
And one thing I want to tell you is that we as lawyers, at times, even when we lose our cases, we have won. Because when you read some of those cases, you'll come out with a lot in terms of precedents. You'll come out with a lot in terms of the arguments that have been presented across. So at the end of the day, it's not a loss.
Okay.
So it's up to even the common mwananchi to come out clearly. Because
is there anything, for example, that the LSK can do? and I guess you cannot control your members, but almost censure those who stand in the way of the fight against corruption? Because there are those who say that you've said certain judges or certain sections of the judiciary have stood in the way of the fight against corruption, political class as well. But what about lawyers and those who...
Lawyers and judges themselves have to
burn the midnight oil to delay corruption cases?
That's a good one. Lawyers and judges, and that is where corruption comes in. We have a duty to this country. We have a duty to ensure that we play our role and play it well. If we embrace corruption and we drive corruption, it then means we are failing this country. And that is our role. So we need to come out strongly and ensure that this cancer called corruption has to fizzle off. And that is what you're talking about. You're just trying to sugarcoat it and make it look nice. But that is what you're asking me, that what is our role? What have we done in terms of even fighting corruption? And this is my call to all lawyers, even to the judicial officers, that it's high time, even we, from where we sit, we rethink how we actually conduct ourselves. For those who are corrupt, it's high time we take a back step, you know, and reflect and ask ourselves, where are we taking this country? Where are we going? Because the judicial system as a whole, together with the bar, we hold this country in our palms. That is where, when a lawyer stands and speaks,
there's a lot of respect
that's accorded to us. So we, as a fraternity, needs to actually come out and embrace this country as a whole, and work with a lot of synergy to ensure that we fight this cancer called corruption. And it's not about lawyers and the judicial and judges alone.
Okay.
Even the court clerks, even the prosecutors, all players within the judicial sector need to actually rethink of what kind of fires we are actually putting this country through.
Okay.
It's about personal reflection. And I was here the other day and I said, before I point the finger to the next person, pointing to myself, what am I doing as an individual from where I sit to ensure that all these systems are in check? And by the way, it starts with small things. It starts with small things, like even when you're caught with a police officer, pay the fine. You know, just
don't
pay
run
the
away
fine.
from. Don't run away from what the law says.
Let us all start asking ourselves, what role do I play in this society?
Fair enough.
You know, and where do we want to go? What do we want to do to ensure that even Wahiga, when he's seated here, he's very happy as a journalist, because he's not afraid when he steps out of there, someone is going to cuff his tie. Even myself, I could have said something here that someone is waiting for me out. You know, just waiting for me to step out.
I trust and hope that no one is waiting for you out there, and I'll take that as your final point as you've asked those questions to Kenyans. That's Harriette Chiggai, Vice President, LSK. Thank you for coming to talk to us a little bit about the LSK's concerns when it comes to the independence of the judiciary. Fred, you look a bit concerned now about the